Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you find yourself on the vast Mongolian steppe, where the land stretches endlessly beneath an open sky, and winter rules with quiet authority. The wind moves freely across frozen grass, snow drifts settle without sound, and survival depends on patience, habit, and small steady choices. You're not a Khan or a warrior, just an ordinary person living through the long cold season, moving with the herds, tending fire, and enduring one day at a time. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You awaken not to walls or corners, but to space, endless space. The land stretches outward in every direction. Flat and pale, the horizon so distant it barely feels real. Above you, the sky hangs wide and heavy, a dull blue-grey that seems to press down rather than lift upward. There is no shelter in sight, no tree to break the line between earth and air, only grass stiff with frost, whispering softly as the wind passes through it. The cold is already present, even before winter fully arrives. It settles into you quietly, without drama. It rests in your fingers, your toes, the tip of your nose. You breathe in, and the air feels thin and sharp, dry enough to sting your lungs just a little. Each breath carries the faint scent of frostbitten grass and distant smoke, a reminder that warmth exists somewhere nearby, even if it must be earned. You pull your clothing closer around yourself, wool against skin, coarse but familiar, layers shaped by generations who learned slowly, carefully, what survives here and what does not. Nothing you wear is decorative. Every fold, every tie, every overlapping piece serves a purpose. The cold has no interest in beauty. It respects only preparation. The wind moves constantly across the steppe. It does not howl or roar yet. For now, it speaks in low murmurs, brushing past your ears, testing the edges of your clothing. It slides along your back, probing for gaps. You learn quickly that the wind is not angry. It is curious, persistent, patient. If you ignore it, it will not ignore you in return. Around you, life continues with a quiet determination. Horses stand with their heads lowered, tails flicking lazily, breath rising in pale clouds. Sheep cluster together, their thick coats dusted with frost, hooves pressing shallow dents into the hardening ground. These animals do not rush. They conserve energy, as though the land itself has taught them the value of stillness. You walk slowly, feeling the crunch beneath your boots. The ground is firm, but not yet frozen solid. Each step sends a subtle vibration up your legs, a reminder that movement costs warmth. You do not waste it. Nothing here is wasted, not effort, not fuel, not time. Far off, a low structure sits against the open land, a round shape, simple and unassuming. As you approach, the smell of smoke grows stronger, carrying hints of burned dung and old embers. The shelter does not rise above the land, it settles into it, a ger. Its felt walls are pale and weathered, shaped by wind, snow, and years of quiet endurance. You duck inside, and the change is immediate, though not dramatic. The air is warmer, but only slightly. Heat gathers close to the ground, near the small fire at the centre. Smoke drifts upward through the opening in the roof, carrying sparks and stories with it. The light inside is soft, filtered, gentle on tired eyes. You sit. The ground beneath you is layered with rugs and hides, worn smooth by countless movements. Everything inside the shelter has a place. Nothing is excessive. Even the silence feels arranged, as though sound itself must be economical. Outside, the wind continues its steady work. You hear it pressing against the felt walls, searching for weakness. The gare answers with a low creak, not resistance, but cooperation. It bends slightly. It allows the wind to pass. Strength here does not come from stiffness. You warm your hands near the fire, rotating them slowly. Careful not to rush the process. The heat seeps in gradually, travelling from skin to bone. It is enough. It does not need to be more. Food is prepared without ceremony. Thick, filling, familiar. Fat and meat, warmed just enough to soften. You eat slowly, chewing with intention. There is no distraction, no hurry. Each bite reminds you that surviving winter begins long before snow deepens. It begins with habit. The day moves quietly forward. Tasks are done because they must be done. Rope is checked, tack adjusted. Animals counted, not out of worry, but out of respect. You notice how often your hands work without thought, guided by memory older than you are. Knowledge here lives in muscle and motion, not in words. As the light fades, the sky deepens into darker shades. The temperature slips lower, almost politely, as if giving you time to adjust. You add fuel to the fire. Dried dung crackles softly, releasing a steady warmth. It is not the smell of comfort, but it is the smell of survival. You grow used to it, the way one grows used to one's own breath. Night settles over the steppe without ceremony. Stars emerge slowly, one by one, until the sky feels crowded with them. They seem closer here, brighter, sharper. The cold sharpens everything. Edges, sounds, thoughts. You step outside briefly, wrapped tightly, and listen. There is no silence, only space filled with subtle life. Wind, hooves shifting, a distant animal calling, then stopping. The world does not sleep, it simply slows. You tilt your head upward. The sky feels endless, uncaring, vast beyond measure. It does not threaten you. It does not welcome you. It exists, as it always has. And beneath it you exist too, small but persistent. The cold seeps in again, reminding you that admiration must be brief. You return inside, sealing the door behind you. The warmth gathers slowly around you once more, like a memory returning to the body. As you lie down, wrapped in layers of fur and felt, you listen to the wind, tracing its paths across the land. It will be stronger soon, sharper, more demanding. You know this without fear. Winter does not arrive suddenly here. It announces itself in whispers, in habits, in the tightening of routines. Your breathing slows. The fire settles into a steady glow. Outside, the steppe waits, and beneath the endless winter sky, you rest. Not because the land is gentle, but because you have learned how to be patient within it. The change arrives quietly, almost politely. One morning, when you step outside, the ground looks the same at first glance. The steppe still stretches wide and open, the horizon still distant and calm. Only when you lower your eyes do you notice it, a thin dusting of white, clinging to the grass, settling into the shallow dips of the land, outlining hoofprints that were once brown and are now pale. The snow is light. It does not crunch underfoot yet. It softens the world rather than freezing it. The blades of grass bend but do not break, their tips coated as if brushed by accident. You brush some away with your boot, half expecting it to disappear by midday. It does not. The air smells different now. Cleaner, sharper. The faint dampness of earth gives way to something drier, colder. Each breath feels lighter, but less forgiving, as though the air itself has decided to thin out and leave less behind with every inhale. You move as you always do, but more carefully, not because the cold demands urgency, but because it rewards attention. Small changes matter here. You tighten a strap that might have been left loose yesterday. You pull your sleeves lower over your wrists. None of this feels dramatic. It feels sensible, almost boring, which is exactly why it works. The animals sense it before you fully do. Horses turn their backs to the wind more often. Sheep cluster closer together. pressing wool against wool, sharing warmth without ceremony. Their behavior does not change suddenly, it simply adjusts, one small decision at a time, as though they're answering a question the land has begun to ask. The snow does not fall heavily, it drifts down in quiet intervals, thin enough to see through, sparse enough to ignore if you are careless. It melts in places where the sun touches the ground directly, but only briefly. By the time you look again, the white has returned, settling into the same places, claiming them with patient insistence. You learn quickly that this is how winter begins here, not with storms or spectacle, but with persistence. The snow arrives and waits. It does not demand attention, it assumes it. Inside the jeer, the difference is subtle, but noticeable. The felt walls hold warmth a little longer now, but the cold presses closer from outside. The fire becomes more than habit. You feed it more thoughtfully, choosing fuel carefully, spacing it out so the heat lasts rather than flares. The smell of smoke lingers longer in the air. It clings to clothing, hair, skin. You carry it with you even when you step outside, a quiet signal to the cold that you are prepared to meet it halfway. Food grows heavier, richer. Fat becomes valuable in ways that feel almost comforting. You eat not to enjoy, but to prepare. The body learns this rhythm quickly. Hunger here is not dramatic, it is practical. You eat before you are desperate because desperation wastes energy. The days shorten without announcement. The sun still rises, but lower now, moving along the sky at a shallower angle. Shadows stretch longer across the steppe, pulling thin lines over the snow-dusted grass. Light feels more fragile, as though it could be misplaced if no one is careful. You find yourself listening more. The sound of hooves against ground changes slightly, less thud and more scrape. The wind carries sharper edges now, lifting fine grains of snow and sending them skimming across the surface like restless thoughts. At night, the cold settles deeper. You feel it first in the quiet moments when movement stops and the body rests. Fingers stiffen if left uncovered. Breath fogs the air inside the shelter before the fire gathers itself again. Sleep comes differently now. Not harder, but slower. You shift beneath layers of fur and felt, adjusting until warmth balances evenly. Too much movement invites the cold back in. Stillness becomes its own skill. Outside, the snow reflects the starlight faintly, turning the land into a pale mirror. The sky feels even larger than before. The stars sharper, brighter, almost intrusive. You step out briefly, wrapped tight, and feel the cold settle immediately into your bones. Not painful yet, but firm. It reminds you that it will not always be so restrained. The snow does not leave the next day, or the one after that. It thins, it thickens, but it remains. Grass bends permanently now, shaped by its weight. Hoof prints last longer, preserved instead of erased. The land begins to remember every step taken across it. Movement becomes more deliberate. You choose paths carefully, following familiar lines across the steppe. The ground still holds, but you know it will not always be forgiving. A wrong step later in the season can cost more than comfort. The animals graze through the snow, noses pushing aside the thin layer to reach what lies beneath. They do not complain. They work. Watching them, you understand that survival here is not heroic. It is repetitive. It is unglamorous. It is done again and again without applause. And there is a strange calm in this realization. The snow simplifies the world. Colours fade, details soften. What remains is function, shelter, heat, food, movement, rest. Occasionally, something almost like humour slips in. A horse snorts impatiently at the cold. A boot slips slightly on frozen ground, corrected quickly, without fuss. These moments do not lighten the mood. They simply acknowledge that even hardship has its small absurdities. The snow continues to fall, lightly, persistently, as if it has nowhere else to be. You stop wondering when it will end. Instead, you adjust how you stand, how you walk, how you breathe. By the time you realize it fully, the first snow has done its work. It has not transformed the land. It has claimed it, quietly, completely. And beneath that thin, stubborn layer of white, life goes on. Not loudly, not proudly, but steadily, learning the shape of a winter that has already decided to stay. You push the door flap aside and step into the round shelter, and the world immediately narrows. Not in a suffocating way, but in a careful one. The wind fades to a dull murmur, its sharp edges softened by layers of felt stretched tight over a wooden frame. The air inside holds stillness, thick with the scent of wool, ash and warmth that has been used many times before and never wasted. The light is low and gentle. It enters from the opening at the top, drifting downward in a thin column, carrying with it faint threads of smoke. Dust floats lazily in that beam, moving so slowly it feels as though time itself has learned to rest here. The fire sits at the centre, modest and steady, its embers glowing without urgency. It does not try to conquer the cold, it simply keeps it from winning. You pause for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The walls curve around you, enclosing space without corners, without shadows that trap the eye. Everything flows in a circle. The shape makes sense in ways you do not immediately name. There is nowhere for the cold to gather and sulk, nowhere for heat to hide and vanish. The gear holds its balance quietly. You remove outer layers with care, folding each piece rather than dropping it. Even inside, the cold remains close enough to demand respect. You learn quickly that warmth here is not a switch that turns on. It is something that accumulates slowly, earned by staying still long enough to let it reach you. The floor beneath you is layered with hides and rugs, each worn smooth by countless feet and knees. The textures are familiar, comforting in their roughness. Nothing here is soft for the sake of softness. Comfort comes from usefulness, repeated until it becomes gentle. You sit near the fire, close enough to feel its presence, without crowding it. The heat brushes your skin in uneven waves, warming one side of your body while the other remains cool. You shift slightly, rotating yourself inch by inch, as though you and the fire are engaged in a quiet conversation about fairness. The smoke drifts upward, slipping through the roof opening as it has done every day, every night, for years. It leaves behind a faint haze that lingers just enough to remind you of its path. The smell clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, your thoughts. It is not unpleasant, it is familiar. It smells like survival practiced long enough to become routine. Outside, the snow continues its patient settling, but inside the gear, time feels thicker. Sounds arrive muffled. Hooves pass somewhere nearby, their rhythm softened by felt walls and distance. Wind presses gently, testing, then moves on when it finds no argument worth having. You become aware of how little space is wasted here. Every object has a reason for being where it is. Saddles hang where they dry evenly. Tools rest close enough to reach without standing. Food stores are placed where cold air touches them, just enough to preserve, but not enough to harden completely. Nothing is accidental, nothing is excessive. You notice how the shelter does not isolate you from the land. It negotiates with it. The felt breathes, the wooden frame flexes. When the wind changes direction, the gear answers by shifting slightly, accepting pressure rather than resisting it. Strength here is quiet and flexible. As the fire settles, you feed it carefully, choosing fuel with practiced restraint. Too much and heat escapes uselessly. Too little and the cold creeps back in, patient and unforgiving. You learn that tending fire is not about creating warmth. It is about maintaining it. A small but steady flame outlasts ambition every time. Food simmers slowly. The smell grows richer as fat warms and softens, filling the space with a heaviness that feels reassuring. You eat without hurry, lifting each bite deliberately, chewing slowly. The meal does not distract you, it grounds you. Eating here feels less like pleasure and more like maintenance, though there is comfort in knowing your body is being prepared for what waits outside. The smoke thickens slightly as evening deepens. You open the roof flap just enough to guide it upward, careful not to invite the cold inside. The movement sends a brief draft through the shelter, sharp and quick before balance returns. The gear settles again, as though satisfied with the adjustment. You lie back against rolled bedding, letting the fire's warmth reach your spine. The cold lingers at the edges of your awareness, reminding you that this shelter is not a fortress. It is a compromise, and somehow that makes it trustworthy. Outside, the land continues its slow transformation. Snow deepens in places where the wind allows it. Elsewhere, grass still shows through, stubborn and flattened. Inside, you feel removed from the urgency of it all, though never fully separate. The shelter does not let you forget where you are. It only gives you space to breathe within it. The night grows longer. The fire dims, brightens, then dims again, following a rhythm older than memory. You listen to it crackle softly, each sound small and unremarkable, yet deeply reassuring. Silence fills the gaps between those sounds, not empty, but full of waiting. Your breath slows. You notice how even breathing feels different here, deeper, more measured. Each inhale warms slightly before reaching your lungs. Each exhale releases a faint cloud that disappears almost immediately, absorbed by the space around you. Sleep does not arrive suddenly. It drifts in, carried on warmth and habit. Your body sinks into layers of felt and fur, their weight pressing gently, like hands reminding you to stay grounded. Outside, the wind moves on, searching for open ground. Inside, patience holds. At some point you wake briefly, not from discomfort, but from awareness. The fire has lowered itself to embers. The air has cooled slightly. Without fully opening your eyes, you add fuel, just enough to keep the balance. The motion feels automatic, learned through repetition rather than thought. You settle again, comforted by the knowledge that shelter here is not about escape. It is about endurance. The gear does not promise ease, it promises continuation, and within its circular walls, wrapped in felt and smoke, you understand that surviving the winter is not an act of defiance. It is an act of cooperation between fire and fuel, body and clothing, shelter and wind, repeated quietly, night after night, until even the cold learns your shape. Morning does not announce itself with light so much as with temperature. You feel it before you see it. The air inside the gear has cooled, not sharply, but enough to stir you from rest. The fire has settled into a quiet bed of embers, still alive, still useful, but no longer generous. You sit up slowly, careful not to let warmth escape too quickly from beneath the layers that held it overnight. Clothing waits nearby, arranged with the same order as everything else. You do not rush toward it. Haste costs heat. Instead, you let your body adjust, breathing steadily, feeling where the cold has crept in during the night. Fingers first, ankles, the small spaces where warmth likes to slip away unnoticed. Getting dressed here is not a single act. It is a sequence, learned through repetition and small corrections made over many winters. Each layer answers a different problem. None of them solve everything. You begin close to the skin, wool first, coarse and familiar. It scratches slightly, but you barely notice anymore. The wool holds warmth even when damp, even when pressed flat by hours of wear. It does not care about comfort, it cares about function, and that earns your respect. Over that comes another layer, heavier, looser. You move carefully as you pull it on, rolling shoulders, easing arms through sleeves that have been repaired more than once. The stitching is uneven in places, but strong. You trust it more than something perfect. You pause between layers, not out of hesitation, but to trap warmth where it is. Each pause allows heat to settle, to spread, to be claimed before the next barrier is added. Dressing too quickly would be wasteful, like burning fuel with no pot above the fire. Boots come next, thick and worn, shaped by feet that know the land. You tap them lightly against the floor, knocking away bits of frost carried in from outside the night before. Inside they are still cold, they always are. You slide your feet in anyway, trusting that movement will eventually convince the leather to soften, the lining to warm. Leg wraps follow, wound carefully, snug but not tight. Too tight, and blood slows. Too loose, and the wind finds a way in. You adjust them until they feel balanced, neither squeezing nor slipping. This balance matters more than appearance. No one here is impressed by elegance. Survival is the only language spoken fluently. A coat of felt and skin goes on last, heavy and familiar, settling onto your shoulders like a responsibility accepted rather than chosen. It smells faintly of smoke and old winters, of work and rest layered together. You tug it closed, overlapping the front panels carefully, making sure the wind will have to work to find its way inside. Your hands linger on the fastenings for a moment, checking each one by touch rather than sight. Fingers learn details eyes might miss. A loose tie, a worn edge. You fix what needs fixing now, while the shelter holds warmth around you. Outside, mistakes feel larger. A hat follows, thick and lined, pulled low over ears. You tuck stray hair beneath it, knowing it will freeze stiff if left exposed. A scarf is wrapped around your neck, not too tight, leaving space for breath to warm the air before it reaches your lungs. You adjust it twice, then once more, until it sits just right. By the time you are fully dressed, movement feels slower, heavier. The weight of clothing presses against you from all sides. You do not fight it. The weight is what keeps you here. Without it, the cold would strip heat away faster than you could replace it. You step toward the door and pause, one hand resting on the wooden frame. Outside waits the wind, sharper now, carrying fine snow that stings exposed skin. You pull the door open just enough to slip through, sealing it behind you quickly, efficiently. The cold greets you immediately, wrapping around your body, testing every seam. You stand still for a moment, letting the layers settle, letting your heat push outward until a fragile balance forms. The wind tugs at the edges of your coat, curious, persistent. It presses against your legs, your arms, your back, searching for carelessness. You give it little to work with. Movement comes next. A few steps forward, a roll of the shoulders, a flex of fingers inside thick gloves. Blood begins to move more freely, carrying warmth where it is needed. The stiffness fades just enough to allow work to begin. The animals are already awake. Horses shift their weight, breath rising in steady clouds. Their winter coats have thickened, hair standing long and rough, trapping air close to their bodies. They do not fight the cold either. They wear it the way you do. You reach out, resting a gloved hand against a horse's neck. The heat beneath the coat surprises you every time. Life holds warmth fiercely when it must. You take a moment there, sharing the quiet, listening to the wind move past both of you, uninterested in choosing sides. As you walk, snow crunches softly beneath your boots. The sound is muted, swallowed quickly by the open land. Each step feels deliberate, measured. There is no room here for careless motion. Falling is not dramatic, but it is inconvenient. An inconvenience in the cold lingers longer than it should. The sky hangs low, pale and distant. Light spreads thinly across the steppe, reflecting off snow and grass alike. There are no shadows sharp enough to hide in. The world is exposed, honest in its emptiness. You adjust your coat as you walk, pulling it tighter across your chest. When the wind shifts, the motion feels automatic, learned without instruction. Clothing here teaches you how to move. Wide gestures are discouraged, sudden turns are softened. Everything becomes economical. Even small tasks take longer now. Fingers lose some of their precision inside gloves. Knots are tied more slowly, checked twice. Tools are handled with care. Dropping something means bending down, exposing yourself to the wind longer than planned. You avoid that when you can. There is a kind of tired humour in it all. The way your sleeves catch on straps. The way a gust of wind finds your face, no matter how carefully you wrap it. You allow yourself a small breath that might almost be a laugh, quickly taken by the air and carried away. It changes nothing. It does not need to. By the time the sun climbs a little higher, your body has found its rhythm again. Warmth circulates beneath the layers. The weight of clothing becomes less noticeable. Like a constant pressure you stop thinking about after a while. You stand for a moment, looking out across the steppe. Snow moves in thin sheets along the ground, driven by the wind, reshaping the surface grain by grain. Nothing resists it. Everything adapts. You pull your coat tighter once more, not because you are cold, but because the motion feels right. Dressing here is never finished. It is adjusted, corrected, repeated. Each layer is an answer, not to comfort but to survival. And wrapped in skins, wool and quiet practicality, you step forward into a world that does not want you, knowing that wanting has never been part of the arrangement. The fire is waiting when you return inside, reduced to a quiet heart of embers. It does not greet you with warmth the way a hearth might in gentler places. It acknowledges you, instead, glowing faintly, patient, as if it has been awake the entire time you were gone, and sees no reason to comment on it. You crouch beside it, lowering yourself carefully, mindful of how heat behaves close to the ground. Your joints protest softly, not from injury, but from cold that has settled deep and grown familiar. You hold your hands out, palms open, turning them slowly, letting the warmth find its way in without forcing it. The fire does not rush to help you. It offers what it has, no more. A small flame flickers as you feed it, dried fuel placed deliberately, never dumped. Too much would choke it, too little would let it fade. You have learned this balance not through instruction, but through nights spent correcting mistakes quietly. As the flame catches, the fire exhales a thin ribbon of smoke that rises toward the roof opening, carrying with it the scent of ash and old heat. The smell is comforting in an understated way. It does not promise ease, it promises continuity. You sit close enough to feel the warmth on your face while your back remains cool. This unevenness is expected. You shift slightly, turning one shoulder toward the flame, then the other. It feels less like seeking comfort and more like participating in a ritual that has no clear beginning or end. The fire crackles softly, each sound small and precise. It does not roar. Roaring would waste energy. Here, even fire has learned restraint. You notice how the light moves inside the gear. Shadows bend gently along the curved walls, stretching and shrinking as the flame adjusts. There are no sharp lines, no sudden movements. The space seems designed to calm the eye, to encourage stillness without demanding it. Outside, the wind presses against the felt walls again. Firmer now. You hear it travel along the shelter's surface, testing seams, slipping away when it finds no argument worth pursuing. The fire answers with a steady glow, neither defiant nor submissive, just present. You add another piece of fuel, smaller than the last. The flame brightens briefly, then settles. Feeding the fire feels intimate, almost personal. You know its moods. You sense when it needs attention and when it prefers to be left alone. There is no schedule written down. You read it the way you read the sky, the animals, your own breath. Heat gathers slowly, creeping along your legs, loosening stiffness. It never overwhelms. It never makes you forget the cold waiting just beyond the walls. That is not its purpose. The fire exists to keep the cold from winning entirely, not to banish it. You think briefly about how fire must look from the outside. just a thin thread of smoke rising into a pale sky, barely visible against the vastness of the steppe. A small signal that life continues inside a fragile circle of felt and wood. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic. Food warms near the fire, not sizzling, not steaming wildly. Just enough heat to soften fat, to release scent. The smell deepens the longer it lingers, filling the space with heaviness that settles into your body like reassurance. You eat slowly again, pausing between bites, letting warmth follow the food inward. The fire watches. It always watches. As you move, as you eat, as you sit quietly, it remains there, steady, predictable. In a land shaped by wind and snow, predictability is valuable. Time passes without markers. The light outside dims further, but inside the ger, the fire maintains its gentle rhythm. You could sit like this for a long while without noticing how long it has been. The fire does not hurry you. It does not ask for attention beyond what is necessary. You stretch your hands closer, then pull them back, finding the edge between comfort and caution. Too close and skin dries, cracks. Too far and stiffness returns. Balance again. Everything here returns to balance eventually. There is a moment when the fire almost feels like company. Not in the way another person might be, but in the way something reliable becomes part of your awareness. You do not speak to it. You do not need to. Its presence fills a space. Words would only clutter. The wind shifts direction, and a brief draft slips through the roof opening. The fire responds immediately, flame leaning, adjusting. Smoke thickens for a moment before finding its way out again. The shelter settles. You pull your coat tighter around your shoulders without standing. The motion small, economical. Later, when the fire lowers again, you stir it gently, coaxing embers closer together. You do not scrape or strike aggressively. Fire does not respond well to impatience. You learned that long ago, though you could not say exactly when. As night deepens, the cold presses harder. You feel it along the edges of the shelter, in the floor beneath the rugs, in the air that slips in with each opening of the door. The fire holds its ground, but it does not advance. It never does. You lie down near it, arranging bedding so that warmth reaches your side evenly. You angle your body slightly, head closer to the heat, feet farther away. This too is learned. Too much heat at the feet invites restlessness. Too little invites waking. The fire settles into embers once more, glowing softly, breathing quietly. You watch it for a while, eyes half closed, following the slow pulse of light. Each ember fades, then brightens, like something thinking in its sleep. Hunger arrives quietly here. It does not rush in with urgency or demand attention all at once. It settles into you the way the cold does, gradually, patiently, making itself known through a heaviness in the limbs and a soft hollow feeling just beneath the ribs. You recognize it early, not because it is dramatic, but because ignoring it would be wasteful. The fire offers enough heat to warm food slowly. You place a pot nearby, close but not eager, letting warmth creep in at its own pace. There is no hurry. Cooking too fast burns fuel, and fuel is not endless. You have learned to let time do some of the work. The smell begins faintly, almost uncertain. Warmed fat, salt, the deep grounding scent of meat that has fed many winters before this one. It fills the space gradually, thickening the air until it presses gently against your senses. The aroma does not excite, it reassures. You sit nearby, adjusting your posture so the heat reaches your hands while your back stays wrapped in cooler air. Eating here is never separate from temperature. Too much heat makes the body sluggish. Too little makes it stiff. You find the middle ground without thinking much about it. When the food is ready, it does not look impressive. There are no bright colours, no delicate arrangements. The meal is dense, pale, and heavy, shaped by necessity rather than creativity. You accept it without judgment. Judgment has no place here. You lift the first bite slowly, steam rising briefly before fading. The warmth reaches your face, carrying scent and memory together. You chew carefully, deliberately. The food resists slightly, requiring effort. That effort feels appropriate. Softness would be suspicious. Each bite settles into your stomach with weight. You feel it spread outward, grounding you. The body responds almost immediately, as if relieved to receive something it knows how to use. Warmth grows from the inside, different from the fire's heat, deeper, more personal. You eat without distraction. There is nothing to read, nothing to watch, nothing to discuss loudly. Eating here is not an event, it is maintenance. The act itself becomes calming in its repetition. Outside, the wind shifts again, carrying snow along the ground in thin lines. You hear it brushing against the felt walls, a reminder that food and shelter are partners in the same negotiation. One without the other would not last long. The meal continues. Bite, chew, swallow, pause. You listen to your own breathing between mouthfuls, steady and slow. The rhythm feels ancient, unchanging. You imagine countless others sitting as you do now, hands warmed briefly by a fire, eating the same kind of food for the same reason. Fat clings to your lips. You wipe it away with the back of your hand, unconcerned. Fat here is not excess, it is insulation stored in another form. The body understands this even if the mind does not linger on it. When the pot is empty, you do not scrape it noisily. You tilt it slightly, letting the last warmth drain, then set it aside. Leftovers are wrapped carefully, placed where cold air will preserve them without freezing them solid. Even placement matters. You lean back, letting the meal settle. The heaviness in your stomach is not uncomfortable. It is stabilizing. It anchors you to the ground, to the moment. Hunger retreats without ceremony, leaving behind a sense of quiet readiness. The fire dims slightly as fuel burns down. You add a small piece, just enough to maintain balance. Eating and fire feel connected now, both responding to attention rather than force. Later, when you step outside briefly, the cold feels different. Not kinder, but less invasive. It presses against you, but your body answers more confidently. You stand straighter. Your breath steadies more quickly. The food has done its work. Animals nearby continue their own routines. Horses chew slowly, heads low, pulling nourishment from beneath the snow. Their movements mirror yours in their patience. No one rushes. Rushing would only make the cold more noticeable. You return inside, closing the door flap carefully. The warmth wraps around you again, softer now that the fire and food have done their part. You sit quietly, hands resting on your knees, feeling the slow exchange between body and shelter. There is a faint humour in how little variety the meals offer. The same textures, the same flavours, over and over. Somewhere in that repetition, the idea of preference fades. What remains is appreciation for consistency. Predictability becomes a kind of luxury. As night deepens, the meal lingers in you, releasing warmth gradually. You feel it when you stretch, when you shift your weight, when you breathe deeply. Eating here is not about pleasure at the moment of taste. It is about how you feel hours later, when the fire has lowered and the wind has grown bolder. You lie down eventually, arranging bedding with the care of someone who knows how much heat the body will give off through the night. The weight inside you helps. It keeps warmth close. It slows the mind. As sleep approaches, you understand something without needing to say it aloud. Survival here is built bite by bite, not through indulgence or choice, but through acceptance of what the cold allows, and careful gratitude for every mouthful that makes tomorrow possible. The cold never belongs to you alone. You feel that the moment you step outside, when the air brushes your face and your breath rises in a pale cloud, that quickly drifts away. Nearby, other clouds rise too, larger, slower, shaped by wider lungs and heavier bodies. Horses stand with their heads lowered, steam curling from their nostrils in steady rhythm. Sheep shift and murmur softly among themselves. Goats pick their way across frozen ground with stubborn confidence. The land holds all of you equally. You walk among them without hurry. Sudden movements waste warmth and startle bodies that already conserve energy carefully. Your boots crunch faintly against snow, a sound that blends into the larger quiet of the steppe. The animals notice you, but they do not react strongly. Your presence is expected, familiar, like the wind, like the cold, like the slow passing of daylight. A horse lifts its head slightly as you approach, dark eyes calm and watchful. Its winter coat has grown long and coarse, hair standing thick and uneven, trapping pockets of air close to its skin. You reach out and rest a gloved hand against its neck. Heat presses back immediately, surprising, even though you know it will be there. Life holds warmth fiercely when it must. You stand like that for a moment, sharing the stillness. The horse's breathing is slow and deep, unbothered by the cold that stings your cheeks. It has lived through this before. It will live through it again, if allowed. The sheep cluster close together, bodies pressed side by side, forming a living wall of woolen warmth. Their coats are dense and heavy now, layered naturally in ways no human garment quite manages to copy. They move as a group, adjusting positions gradually, never breaking the cluster for long. Watching them, you understand something important without words. Warmth multiplies when shared. You move among them carefully, checking for injuries, for signs of weakness, a limp, a shiver that lasts too long. Most look steady, their movements slow but deliberate. Winter does not reward speed, it rewards endurance. The goats wander a little farther out, noses down, scraping snow aside with practiced motions to reach what lies beneath. They are stubborn creatures, less patient than sheep, more willing to argue with the land. Even so, they have learned where to stop. You watch one test the ground, pausing briefly before moving on. It knows better than to waste effort where nothing will be found. Care here is quiet work. There are no dramatic gestures, no grand rescues. You adjust a strap, clear ice from a water container, guide an animal gently back toward the group. Each small action stacks upon the next, forming a pattern that keeps everything moving forward. The animals respond not with gratitude, but with continuation. They eat, they breathe, they stand through the wind. That is enough. As the day progresses, the cold shifts slightly, sharpening when clouds thin and softening when snow begins to fall again. The animals adjust with it, turning their backs to the wind, lowering heads, conserving energy in ways that feel instinctive and practiced. You mirror them without thinking, angling your body, pulling your coat tighter, letting movement become smaller and more efficient. There is a rhythm to this shared existence. Morning checks, slow grazing, periods of stillness, occasional movement to keep blood flowing. The pattern repeats, not because it is interesting, but because it works. At times, a faint sense of humour surfaces, thin and tired but present. A goat refuses to move, despite gentle urging, standing stubbornly in place until you walk around it instead. A sheep shakes itself violently, sending frost and snow outward in a brief chaotic burst before settling again. These moments do not break the calm. They sit within it, reminders that even here, life resists becoming entirely solemn. The horses shift their weight from leg to leg, resting each limb in turn to conserve strength. You recognize the posture. You have found yourself doing something similar without realizing it, leaning slightly, redistributing weight when standing too long in the cold. The body learns by watching, even across species. When you lead the animals closer to shelter, movement is slow and deliberate. You do not rush them. Panic burns energy faster than cold ever could. Instead, you walk ahead, setting a pace that invites following rather than demands it. The animals respond, hooves crunching softly, breath steady. Inside the shelter area, the air feels marginally calmer. The wind loses some of its edge. Snow drifts settle unevenly around the animals' legs, forming shallow banks that shift with every step. You take a moment to clear paths where needed, pushing snow aside with your boot. It is small work, but it matters. You check water again, breaking thin ice where it has formed. The sound is sharp but brief. The animals drink slowly, each taking its turn without urgency. Water here is not gulped, it is respected. As the light fades, you move through the group one last time, hands brushing wool and hide, feeling for warmth, for steadiness. Your fingers come away smelling faintly of animal and earth, a scent that feels grounding rather than unpleasant. It reminds you where you are and what keeps you alive. When you step back, the animals settle. Sheep fold their legs beneath them. Horses lower their heads, eyes half-lidded. Goats tuck themselves into the edges, alert even at rest. They arrange themselves instinctively, forming shapes that trap warmth and block wind. No instruction is needed. The land taught them long before you arrived. You stand quietly, watching breath rise and fall across the group, a field of slow-moving clouds. In this moment, the boundary between human and animal feels thinner than usual. You all respond to the same forces. You all depend on the same careful balance. Eventually, the cold presses in more firmly, nudging you back towards shelter. You take one last look, memorizing the arrangement, the shapes, the quiet resilience on display. Then you turn away, steps measured, carrying with you the knowledge that survival here is never solitary. Inside, warmth gathers again, modest and steady. As you settle near the fire, the sounds of animals outside remain faintly present, breathing, shifting, the soft scrape of hooves. They form a low, living background to the night. Wrapped in felt and shadow, you rest with the understanding that when morning comes, you will step out into the cold together again. No comfort promised, only continuation. It is the wind that reaches you first, before the cold fully announces itself. Not a sudden gust, not a dramatic howl, but a constant movement that never seems to rest. It slides along the surface of the land, tracing every hollow and rise, brushing against your body with the familiarity of something that has met you many times before. You feel it against your face as soon as you step outside. It presses lightly at first, testing the shape of your clothing, the way water tests stone. Then it settles into a steady presence, pushing and pulling without urgency, as if it has all the time in the world. In a place like this, it does. The wind carries sound strangely. Distant hooves seem closer than they are. The creak of felt and rope travels farther than expected. Even your own breath feels louder, pushed back toward you, shaped by invisible currents. You learn not to trust distance as much as direction. Snow moves with the wind now, lifted from the ground in thin sheets that skim across the steppe. It does not fall so much as travel, sliding low and fast, reshaping the surface grain by grain. You watch it pass, fascinated by how little effort it takes to change everything. At first, you try to resist it. You square your shoulders. You pull your coat tighter and walk straight into its path. The effort is tiring, and the wind does not notice. It does not grow angry. It does not grow impressed. It continues exactly as it was. Gradually, without a clear moment of decision, your body adjusts. You angle yourself slightly when you walk, letting the wind move past rather than against you. You lower your head just enough to protect your face. You turn your back when stopping to work, using your body as a shield for your hands. None of this feels like surrender. It feels like conversation. The animals understand this better than you ever could. Horses stand with their rumps to the wind, tails flicking lazily, heads low and steady. Sheep shift their positions as the wind shifts, tightening their cluster, loosening it again when pressure eases. Even the goats, stubborn as they are, choose their paths carefully, hugging low ground where the wind loses some of its strength. You follow these patterns without thinking. You choose routes that dip slightly, paths worn smooth by generations of hooves and boots, seeking the same small relief. The land offers little shelter, but it offers hints, subtle suggestions that reward attention. When the wind strengthens, it finds its way into places you thought were sealed. A wrist exposed for just a moment, a seam that has loosened with age. The gap between scarf and collar when you turn your head too quickly. Each weakness is noted immediately. The wind remembers. It stings your eyes, dries your skin, pulls heat away faster than still air ever could. You blink slowly, deliberately, protecting moisture. You keep movements economical. Wide gestures only invite more surface for the wind to work against. There are moments when standing still feels easier than moving. You pause, letting the wind rush past you, feeling it press and slide and move on. The body learns when to wait. Pushing forward at the wrong moment costs more than it gains. Inside the shelter, the wind makes itself known in softer ways. It presses against the felt walls, causing them to flex and breathe. It hums faintly through ropes and poles, a low, constant sound that settles into the background of your thoughts. Even when you cannot feel it directly, you know it is there. At night, it speaks more clearly. You lie wrapped in layers, listening as it moves around the ger, circling, testing, slipping away. Sometimes it rattles the door flap gently, not asking to come in, just reminding you of its presence. The fire responds by leaning slightly, flame bending without breaking. Sleep comes and goes in light waves. The wind does not wake you sharply. It nudges you toward awareness, then allows you to drift back again. In these moments, it feels less like an enemy and more like a restless companion, pacing outside while you rest. During the day, the wind reshapes your routines. Tasks are chosen based on its mood. Some things can wait, others must be done quickly, during brief lulls when movement feels easier. You become attuned to these changes, sensing them in your skin before you fully notice them, with your eyes. There is a particular sound the wind makes just before it strengthens, a tightening, a subtle rise in pitch. When you hear it, you pause, hands still, posture ready. When the stronger gust arrives, you turn slightly, let it pass, then continue. Fighting it would only leave you colder, more tired. The wind carries smells too. Smoke from your fire stretches thin and long, trailing far across the steppe. The scent of animals drifts toward you, then away again. Sometimes the wind brings nothing at all, just clean, empty cold that smells like distance. Your face grows weathered, skin roughened by constant exposure. You accept it without complaint. Smoothness has little value here. What matters is resilience, the ability to hold together under pressure. There is a strange intimacy in how well the wind learns you. It finds the same places again and again, brushing your cheekbones, tugging at the hem of your coat, slipping around your neck when your scarf loosens. You respond automatically, adjusting, tightening, turning. Over time, the movements feel almost polite, like acknowledging someone you pass every day. Occasionally, the wind relents. It softens briefly, allowing snow to fall straight down, quiet and gentle. These moments feel fragile, temporary. You use them well, moving more freely, accomplishing small tasks while the land allows it. You do not expect the calm to last. When the wind returns, and it always does, you are ready. Not braced, not tense, simply prepared. As evening approaches, it grows colder again, the wind sharpening with the fading light. You guide animals toward positions that offer even a slight break from its force. You turn your own shelter so its strongest side meets the pressure directly. Orientation matters more than strength. Inside, warmth gathers once more. The wind remains outside, audible but distant, its voice softened by felt and patience. You sit near the fire, listening to its low murmur, no longer unsettled by it. The wind does not hate you. It does not care about you at all. And somehow, that makes it easier to live with. You rest with the understanding that survival here is not about conquering the elements. It is about learning their habits, recognizing their moods, and shaping your life quietly around them. Outside, the wind continues to move across the steppe, carrying snow, sound, and cold wherever it wishes. Inside, you remain still, warm enough, breathing slowly. The wind knows your name now, and you have learned when to answer and when to simply wait. The day does not wait for comfort, it waits only for light. When you step outside, the snow has changed again. Not deeper everywhere, just rearranged. Wind has carved shallow ridges across the ground, piling white into soft drifts and scraping other places nearly bare. The steppe never looks the same 2 mornings in a row, even though it always feels familiar. Your breath rises and fades quickly, carried away before it can linger. The cold is sharper now, not surprising, just firm. You pause briefly, letting your body adjust, then begin moving, because stillness invites stiffness faster than the cold ever could. There is work to be done. There always is. You walk first to where the animals gather, boots finding firm ground between patches of ice. Each step is placed carefully, not because you fear falling, but because unnecessary effort is expensive. The snow crunches softly, a sound that has become part of the background of your thoughts. The animals greet the day without ceremony. Horses shift their weight, steam rising from their nostrils. Sheep stir, rearranging themselves into new clusters as the light changes. Goats test the air, alert but unbothered. They do not ask what needs to be done. They assume you know. You begin with the simple things. Water must be checked. Ice forms overnight. Thin but stubborn. You strike it with controlled force, breaking it cleanly without splashing. The sound echoes briefly, sharp and clear, then disappears into the open land. You scoop away loose snow from feeding areas, revealing patches of grass or stored fodder beneath. The motion is repetitive, almost meditative. Push, lift, step aside, push again. The cold works its way into your shoulders, your lower back, but not deeply enough to matter. Tools feel heavier in the cold, wood stiffens, metal bites. You handle everything with care, gripping firmly, but not tightly. Tight hands lose warmth too quickly, loose hands drop things, balance again. As you work, small inconveniences pile up. A strap stiffened by frost refuses to lie flat. A knot must be retied twice because fingers lack precision. Snow slips into your boot when you misjudge a step. None of it is serious. All of it takes time. There is a faint humour in this. Thin and dry. The land throws small obstacles at you, not out of malice, but indifference. You respond by slowing down, correcting, continuing. No one is watching. No one is keeping score. The sun climbs higher, but offers little warmth. It shines pale and distant, its light reflecting sharply off the snow. You squint, lowering your head slightly, letting your hat and brow do the work your eyes would rather not. Your breath settles into a steady rhythm as your body warms from movement. Work here is the most reliable source of heat, not bursts of effort, but sustained motion. You keep going, knowing when to pause and when to push just a little longer. You check ropes and poles around the shelter, brushing snow away, testing tension. Wind loosens things, slowly, patiently. You tighten what needs tightening now, while it is still manageable. Waiting would only make the task harder later. Inside the jeer, the fire is fed again, just enough to keep it alive while you remain outside. Smoke stretches thinly into the sky, drawn out by the wind. From a distance, it looks fragile. Up close, it smells of steadiness. Back outside, you move among the animals again, hands brushing wool and hide. A sheep startles slightly at a sudden movement, then settles when it recognizes you. A horse flicks its ears, unimpressed by your presence but tolerant of it. Snow continues to fall lightly, not enough to stop work, just enough to make everything feel slower. You brush it from your sleeves without thinking, the motion automatic. It collects on your shoulders, your hat melting briefly before freezing again. Midday passes without announcement. Hunger nudges you, but not urgently. You finish what you are doing before addressing it. Stopping halfway costs momentum, and momentum is warmth. When you do pause, you stand with your back to the wind, leaning slightly, letting the cold pass around you. You eat a small portion, enough to keep energy steady. No feast, no ceremony, just fuel, taken efficiently. Work resumes. You clear paths where snow has drifted too deeply, making travel easier for animals and yourself. The paths are not straight. They curve slightly, following the land's shape, avoiding places where ice hides beneath powder. Experience guides your feet more than thought. The cold presses harder as the afternoon wears on. Your movements grow smaller, more economical. You do not rush. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes linger. There is a moment when your fingers fumble with a simple task, and you pause, hands hovering uselessly for a second too long. You shake them out gently, restoring circulation, and try again. It works this time. You exhale, not in relief but acceptance. By the time the light begins to fade, the work is not finished. It never is. But it is enough. Enough for today. Enough to keep things moving forward. You take one last slow look around. Animals are settled. Water flows again. The shelter stands steady against the wind. Small victories, barely worth noting, except that without them, nothing else would matter. As you turn back toward the gare, snow crunches beneath your boots, the sound steady and familiar. Your body feels heavy now, pleasantly so, warmed by effort and fatigue combined. The cold feels less sharp when muscles are tired in the right way. Inside, warmth gathers again. You peel off outer layers slowly, careful not to rush the release of heat. The fire waits, patient as ever. You sit, breathing deeply, feeling the ache in your shoulders, your legs. It is not pain, it is proof of movement, of work done. Outside, the snow continues to fall, indifferent to your efforts. Tomorrow, much of this will need to be done again. Perhaps all of it. The thought does not bother you. There is a quiet satisfaction in repetition, in knowing exactly what is required and doing it without complaint. The world may freeze solid around you, but work continues, steady and unremarkable. And in that steadiness you find something close to peace. Darkness gathers long before the day feels finished. The light thins quietly, draining from the steppe as if drawn downward into the snow itself. The sky fades through pale blues into deeper shades, and then, almost without notice, the land belongs to night. You close the shelter carefully, fingers moving by habit rather than sight. Outside, the last shapes soften and blur, animals settling into low silhouettes against the white ground. Inside, the gare grows smaller, the circle of warmth more clearly defined against the cold pressing from every side. The fire glows at the centre, its light low and steady, barely enough to push back the shadows. It is not meant to illuminate the whole space. It marks a point of focus, a reminder of where warmth can be found when needed. Everything beyond its reach fades into gentle obscurity. You wrap yourself in furs, layering them with the same care you give your clothing during the day. Weight matters at night, too little and sleep breaks apart. Too much and the body overheats, forcing you to wake and adjust. You settle gradually, testing, shifting, listening to what your body asks for. Outside, the wind moves differently after dark. It loses some of its sharpness, gaining instead a low, steady voice. It slides across the steppe, brushing against the shelter in slow passes, pressing and releasing. The sound becomes part of the night's texture, like breathing you can hear but do not need to follow. Animals shift in the darkness. A horse stamps once, then stills. Sheep murmur softly, the sound muffled by wool and snow. Somewhere farther away, a goat scrapes at the ground. Persistent even now, these noises rise and fall without pattern, reassuring in their familiarity. You listen without effort. There is nothing to interpret, nothing to anticipate. The sounds exist whether you attend to them or not. Letting them pass through your awareness feels easier than trying to hold on to them. The cold presses closer at night, seeping in through the floor, the walls, the air itself. You feel it first at the edges of your body, then deeper, where warmth has already begun to slow. You draw the furs tighter, creating a pocket of heat that belongs only to you. Time stretches here, unmarked by clocks or tasks. Moments lose their sharp edges. The mind drifts, not toward dreams yet, but toward a softer state, where thoughts come and go without urgency. Memories surface briefly, then fade. Plans dissolve into general intentions rather than specifics. You become aware of the fire again, not by sight but by its sound. A small crackle, a shift in embers. The fire never fully sleeps. It rests lightly, prepared to answer if called upon. Knowing it is there allows you to relax into stillness. At some point you stir and reach out, adding a small piece of fuel. The movement is slow and careful, performed without fully waking. The flame brightens briefly, then settles back into its steady glow. Smoke drifts upward, thin and patient. The night feels long, longer than any day. Darkness presses in, not as a threat, but as a presence that demands accommodation. You do not try to shorten it. You accept its length, letting it expand until it feels almost infinite. There are moments when sleep approaches, brushes past, then retreats. You lie still, breathing evenly, allowing it to return in its own time. Forcing rest only makes it more elusive. You have learned that patience works better. Outside, the temperature drops further. The snow stiffens. Ice thickens in quiet layers. The world becomes harder, more solid, while you remain wrapped in softness and warmth, suspended between wakefulness and rest. Your body sinks deeper into the bedding, muscles releasing their hold. The ache from the day's work fades slowly, replaced by a heavy calm. You feel each breath travel in and out, warming the air just enough before releasing it again. The night does not end quickly. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, like the furs around you. Hours pass without distinction. You wake briefly once or twice, adjusting your position, pulling the covering closer, then drift back again. In these half-waking moments, the boundary between thought and sensation blurs. The sound of wind becomes a memory. The smell of smoke feels like a feeling rather than a scent. Time loses its direction, stretching backward and forward at once. Eventually, deeper sleep arrives. Not sudden, not complete, but sufficient. The kind of rest that allows the body to hold warmth and conserve energy, even as the cold continues its quiet work outside. When you stir again, much later, the darkness remains. It feels unchanged, as though the night has barely moved. Yet something inside you feels steadier, more settled, ready to endure what remains. Wrapped in furs, surrounded by wind, animals and fire, you exist within the long, patient hours. The night may stretch like centuries, but you do not count them. You let time soften, and in that softness, you rest. The night loosens its grip slowly, not by lifting away, but by easing its weight just enough for voices to rise without effort. You sit closer to the fire now, not because it has grown colder, but because the space feels quieter when bodies gather near the same point of light. Shadows curve along the walls, stretching and shrinking as the flame shifts. The circle tightens, not deliberately, just naturally. Like animals leaning inward against weather, they already understand. Someone clears their throat softly, Another shifts, furs whispering against felt. No one announces a beginning. The moment arrives on its own. A voice speaks, low and unhurried, shaped by fatigue more than intention. It tells of a journey taken once, long ago, across land, just as cold as this. The details are sparse, names are unnecessary. The point is not accuracy, it is rhythm. You listen without leaning forward, without nodding. Listening here does not require visible effort. The words drift through the air like smoke curling gently, lingering only where they are needed. The story moves slowly. A horse that refused to cross a frozen stream. A night spent awake because the fire would not hold. A boot lost to mud that had looked solid but was not. Nothing remarkable, nothing heroic. The voice pauses often, not for emphasis, but because breath and warmth must be managed carefully. Someone else adds a small correction, spoken quietly, almost apologetically. The tone is not argumentative, it is cooperative. Memory is shared here, adjusted gently rather than defended. You feel yourself settle deeper into the bedding as the words continue. The fire responds with a soft crackle, as if acknowledging its role in this exchange. The warmth rises briefly, then steadies again. The story drifts towards something almost like humour. A horse that chose the worst possible moment to lie down. A pot tipped just enough to spill its contents into snow. The laughter that follows is brief and muted, more breath than sound. It fades quickly, leaving behind a faint warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. No one tries to keep the humour alive, that would feel unnecessary. The smile lingers instead, quiet and tired, then dissolves naturally back into stillness. Another voice picks up where the first leaves off, though not in any planned way. It speaks of weather that turned without warning, of snow that arrived early and stayed late. The description is calm, unembellished. Winter does not need exaggeration to feel real. You notice how the stories avoid sharp edges. There are no loud dangers, no sudden losses described in detail. What is spoken stays within the boundaries of endurance. Anything heavier remains unspoken, understood without being named. The fire lowers slightly, embers shifting. Someone reaches out and adjusts it without interrupting the flow of words. The motion is seamless, practiced. Stories and survival here share the same space without competing. Time stretches again, but differently now. Less heavy, more fluid. The stories create small markers, gentle pauses that give shape to the long evening without breaking it into pieces. You feel the weight of the day in your body as the voices continue. Muscles soften further, breath deepens, the cold still exists, but it feels distant, less insistent when attention is shared. A story trails off midway through a sentence. The speaker does not apologize. Silence accepts the pause easily, holding it for several breaths before another voice fills the space, or sometimes before no voice does at all. These moments of silence are not empty. They carry the echo of words just spoken, like warmth lingering after a hand is pulled away from the fire. You sit within them, comfortable, unhurried. There is a subtle purpose beneath all of this, not entertainment, not instruction. The stories are told to keep the mind gently occupied, to prevent it from drifting too far inward, where worries might sharpen. Words here act like kindling, small and steady, feeding something fragile but necessary. You find yourself recalling fragments of stories you have heard before. Not the details, but the feeling of them. The way they settle into the night, smoothing its rough edges. You do not try to remember them clearly. Clarity is not the goal. At some point, someone mentions the wind, how it sounded different once, how it fooled them into thinking a storm was coming when it was not. The comment draws a few soft acknowledgements. The wind, too, is a familiar character in these evenings, known well enough not to require description. Another faint smile passes through the circle when someone admits to speaking to the fire once, late at night, asking it to last until morning. The admission is met not with mockery, but understanding. Everyone here has done something similar, whether they would say so or not. The fire flickers gently, as if pleased by the acknowledgement. As the evening deepens, the stories shorten. Sentences grow simpler, voices lower further. Fatigue settles over the group like another layer of fur, heavy but welcome. You feel yourself drifting closer to rest again, eyelids growing heavier. The stories begin to blur, words dissolving into tone, into cadence. Meaning becomes less important than sound. Eventually, the talking stops without any clear ending. No one says goodnight, no one marks the moment. Silence returns, fuller now, shaped by everything that was just shared. The fire remains, breathing softly. Outside, animals shift, wind moves, snow settles. Inside, the night feels less vast than before, as though it has been gently folded inward. Wrapped in warmth and quiet memory, you let your mind release its hold. The stories have done their work, not by teaching or entertaining, but by keeping you steady long enough for sleep to return on its own terms. And as rest takes you again, the calm lingers like embers glowing quietly beneath ash, ready to warm the next long night when words are needed once more. The decision to move does not arrive with urgency. It settles quietly, the way cold does, recognized rather than announced. You wake with the sense that staying would cost more than leaving, and that understanding feels settled enough not to question. Inside the shelter, the air holds the familiar blend of smoke and wool. The fire has lowered itself to embers again, still alive, still useful. You sit for a moment, breathing slowly, letting your body adjust before asking it to work. Outside waits a day shaped by motion, and motion demands preparation. Packing begins with small, careful movements. You fold furs deliberately, smoothing them flat to trap the warmth they still hold. Each piece is rolled tight, tied with practiced knots that fingers remember even when they move slowly. Stiffness lingers in your joints, but you do not rush them. Rushing would only invite mistakes. The shelter empties gradually, not stripped bare, but gently rearranged. Objects shift from the ground to bundles, from familiar positions to places that will ride against a horse's side or rest across a back. Nothing is discarded. Everything has earned its place. The felt walls come down last. You loosen the ties slowly, allowing the structure to relax rather than collapse. As the covering peels away, cold air slips in, sharp and immediate. You pause, letting it wash over you briefly before continuing. The body learns to accept such moments without complaint. Wooden poles are stacked neatly, aligned so they balance easily when carried. The frame that once held warmth now lies quiet and ordinary against the snow. There is no ceremony in this. Shelter here is temporary by design. Its strength lies in how easily it can be taken apart. Outside, animals wait, shifting patiently. Horses stand with their heads low, breath steady. They sense movement coming and conserve energy accordingly. Sheep gather close, their bodies pressed together for warmth even as they prepare to move. Goats wander in short arcs, testing the ground, curious but unbothered. You secure loads carefully, adjusting straps, redistributing weight. Balance matters more than speed. A poorly placed bundle rubs skin raw or loosens with each step. You check each tie twice, fingers numb but precise. When everything is ready, you take a moment to look at the place you are leaving. The snow is marked by shallow impressions. Hoof prints, boot tracks, the faint circle where the shelter stood. Nothing dramatic, nothing that will last long. The land has already begun smoothing over your presence. You step forward and the movement begins. The group moves slowly at first, bodies stiff from cold and rest. Hooves crunch softly, breaking thin crusts of ice. The sound carries briefly, then disappears into the open space. Snow shifts beneath your boots, sometimes firm, sometimes deceptive. You adjust your stride without thinking, letting memory guide your feet. The path is not marked, yet it feels known. Subtle dips, slightly darker patches where grass pushes through snow, the faint curve of the land. All of it guides you forward. You trust these signs more than any visible trail. Snow hides as much as it reveals. The wind presses from the side, not strong but insistent. You angle your body slightly, letting it pass rather than resist. The animals do the same, their movements coordinated without instruction. This shared adjustment feels natural, learned through long familiarity with the step. As you walk, warmth builds slowly in your legs and back. The initial stiffness fades, replaced by the steady heat of movement. Breath settles into a rhythm that matches your pace. Too fast and you sweat, too slow and the cold finds its way in. You find the middle ground again. The landscape remains open and quiet. Snow stretches outward, broken only by low ridges and the occasional dark shape of distant hills. The sky hangs pale and wide above you, offering no commentary on your journey. It watches without interest. Time stretches here, but movement gives it shape. Steps become markers, each one a small confirmation that forward is still possible. You do not measure distance, you measure effort. Occasionally, you pause to let animals adjust loads or to rest briefly. These stops are short and efficient. Standing still too long invites cold into places movement keeps warm. You wait just long enough, then continue. There is a strange calm in this process. Leaving does not feel like loss. Staying never felt permanent enough for that. The land has always been something you pass through rather than possess. It accepts your departure as easily as it accepted your arrival. As the day wears on, light shifts subtly, shadows stretching thin across the snow. The cold deepens, but your body remains warm from steady motion. You pull your coat tighter once or twice, adjusting as needed, then let your hands fall back into rhythm. You become aware of how little sound you make. Even the animals move quietly, as though respecting the stillness around them. The frozen silence feels thick, almost tangible, broken only by breath and the soft impact of hooves. There is no sense of hurry. The destination exists somewhere ahead, but it does not pull at you. What matters is the movement itself, the careful placement of each step, the way the land responds beneath your feet. Eventually, you slow again, scanning the terrain. A slight rise offers a break from the wind. Snow there looks thinner, ground firmer. You stop, considering, then nod slightly to yourself. This place will do. The animals sense the pause and settle quickly, lowering heads, releasing tension. You begin unloading with the same measured care as before, hands stiff again, movements deliberate. As the shelter takes shape once more, felt rising, poles lifting, the cold retreats slightly. The familiar circle forms again, not as a copy of what was left behind, but as a continuation. When the door flap closes and the fire is coaxed back to life, warmth gathers slowly, patiently. Outside, the wind moves on, uninterested in where you have stopped. You sit inside the newly raised shelter, breathing in smoke and wool, feeling the fatigue settle into your bones. The journey is over for now. The land remains the same, vast, cold, indifferent. And within that frozen silence, you rest, knowing that movement itself has carried you safely through another stretch of winter. The new shelter holds its warmth slowly, as all things do here. You sit within it, listening to the fire settle, feeling the quiet weight of having arrived without needing to celebrate it. Outside, the land remains unchanged by your movement. Snow stretches on, wind drifts past, the sky keeps its distance. Inside, something has shifted, not in place, but in you. Endurance is no longer something you think about directly. It has moved beneath thought, into habit, into posture, into the way your hands pause before acting. Winter has been teaching you all along, not through lessons, but through repetition. You notice how your expectations have narrowed, not in a way that feels like loss, but like focus. You no longer imagine comfort as something expansive or dramatic. Comfort is a fire that holds, a coat that fits correctly, a night without waking too often. These are sufficient. Your body has changed in small ways. Movements are slower now, not because you are weaker, but because speed has stopped offering rewards. You rise carefully. You sit deliberately. You plan tasks in a quiet order that wastes nothing. Strength still matters, but it no longer leads. Patience does. The cold presses in again as the day moves forward, but it feels familiar now. It does not surprise you. You feel it at the edges first, fingers, face, breath, then deeper, settling into places you know how to manage. You respond without irritation. Irritation would only sharpen it. Outside, animals move with the same calm acceptance. Horses stand with heads lowered, conserving energy. Sheep adjust their clusters, tightening, loosening, finding balance without instruction. You see yourself reflected in these movements, not as imitation, but as shared adaptation. The wind arrives as it always does, brushing the shelter, passing over the ground. You do not look up immediately. You know its tone now. You can hear when it will pass quickly and when it intends to stay. Today it stays. You choose not to go far. The land will still be there tomorrow. That decision feels neither cautious nor lazy. It feels correct. Winter rewards knowing when not to act. Inside you arrange small things. Tools are checked, not repaired unless necessary. Clothing is adjusted, not replaced. Food is measured with quiet care. You no longer feel the urge to prepare for every possibility. You prepare instead for what reliably comes. Time passes without drama. The fire lowers, rises slightly, then steadies again. Smoke drifts upward, leaving its scent behind. You breathe it in without thinking much about it. It has become part of the air you expect. Your thoughts move differently now. They are smaller, slower, less likely to race ahead. You think in terms of hours rather than days, in tasks rather than outcomes. Winter has trimmed away excess imagination, leaving only what serves the present moment. There is a strange relief in this. The mind rests when it is no longer asked to predict too far ahead. You accept that the cold will return tomorrow, that work will repeat, that nights will remain long. Acceptance here is not defeat, it is alignment. You step outside briefly, pulling your coat close, feeling the cold press in immediately. The sky is pale, distant, unbothered. Snow moves along the ground in thin, restless lines. You stand still, letting it pass around you rather than through you. You realize that you no longer measure winter by its difficulty. You measure it by rhythm, by how the body responds, by how the mind settles. Hardship has become background, no longer requiring constant attention. The fire calls you back inside, not loudly, but with the promise of steadiness. You return, closing the shelter carefully, sealing warmth in with practiced hands. As evening approaches, the light fades again, and with it, any lingering sense of urgency. Darkness arrives without tension. You welcome it as part of the cycle, not an interruption. You eat slowly, not because you are tired, but because haste no longer feels useful. Each bite feels deliberate, grounded. The food does not thrill, it sustains. That is enough. Later, as you settle into rest, wrapped in familiar layers, you listen to the quiet sounds around you. Wind, animals, fire, your own breathing. None of it demands change. Winter has taught you something simple and profound, that survival is rarely about pushing harder. It is about knowing when to stop pushing altogether, when to conserve, when to accept the shape of things as they are. Your thoughts drift unforced towards sleep. There is no need to fight wakefulness or chase rest. Both arrive when allowed. As you lie there, warmth held close, cold kept just at bay, you understand that endurance here is not a heroic trait. It is a way of thinking shaped by long exposure to a world that cannot be argued with. And in learning that way of thinking, you have learned how to remain quietly, steadily, through the heart of winter. The change does not arrive with celebration. It comes the way most things do here, quietly, almost apologetically, as if unsure it will be allowed to stay. You notice it first in the light, not brighter exactly, but longer. The sky lingers a little more in the morning, hesitating before darkness pulls it back again. At dusk, the horizon holds colour longer than it should, pale gold stretched thin across snow that no longer looks quite so solid. You do not trust this at first. Winter has taught you caution. It has taught you that kindness from the land is often temporary, and that believing too quickly costs more than waiting. So you observe without reacting, letting the days pass, counting changes not in hope, but in consistency. Snow still covers the ground, but it behaves differently now. Its surface softens slightly during the day, losing some of its brittle resistance. Footprints sink just a little deeper before freezing again at night. The land feels less rigid, as though it has begun to breathe again, slowly, carefully. The wind still comes, but its edge has dulled. It no longer slices so cleanly through layers. It moves with less urgency, lingering rather than pushing. You feel it on your face, and notice that your eyes do not sting quite as quickly as they once did. Inside the shelter, the fire lasts longer with less fuel. You add pieces more slowly now, watching how the warmth holds without demanding constant attention. Smoke rises more easily through the roof opening, drifting upward in lazy spirals rather than thin, desperate lines. Your clothing feels heavier than before, not because it has changed, but because your body no longer needs it in quite the same way. You still wear every layer. Habit insists on it, but there are moments when you loosen a tie slightly, or leave your hands uncovered for a few breaths longer than usual. These small risks feel unfamiliar. Outside, the animals sense the shift before you fully accept it. Horses lift their heads more often, ears turning toward distant sounds that had gone unnoticed all winter. Sheep spread out slightly, loosening their tight clusters. Goats wander farther, testing ground that had been ignored for months. You watch all of this without comment, allowing them to lead. They have always known when to move and when to wait. You have learned to listen. Work continues, though its shape changes. Snow still needs clearing in places, but less of it. Water freezes overnight, but breaks more easily in the morning. Movement feels lighter, less costly. Your body warms faster, holds heat longer. Still, you do not hurry. Winter has carved patience into you, deep and lasting. You no longer rush to meet possibility. You let it approach you instead, proving itself over time. There is a day when you notice the ground beneath the snow smells different. Damp, earthy, faint but unmistakable. You pause, breathing it in, then continue on without lingering. One scent does not make a season. At night, darkness still stretches long, but it no longer feels endless. Sleep comes more easily, and when you wake, the fire has not fallen quite so low. The cold presses in, but it does not bite as deeply. It reminds you of itself without asserting dominance. You find yourself standing outside longer than necessary, looking across the steppe as light spreads wider each morning. The land remains vast and open, unchanged in shape, yet subtly altered in mood. Snow retreats unevenly, revealing flattened grass beneath, pale, pressed low, but alive. This realization settles into you, slowly, alive. The thought does not bring excitement, it brings recognition. You realize that winter has not left you. It has moved inward, into how you stand, how you plan, how you measure comfort. You still turn away from the wind instinctively, You still check your fire more often than needed. You still eat with the same steady care, not because food is scarce now, but because waste feels unnatural. These habits do not fade when the cold loosens. They remain, quiet and useful. There is a moment, small, easily missed, when you notice water moving freely again, not flowing fast, not singing, just slipping along where ice once held it still. You crouch, gloved hand hovering just above the surface, feeling cold air rise from it. The water does not rush, it does not celebrate. It simply moves. You straighten slowly, feeling something loosen in your chest that you did not realize had been held tight. Animals graze longer now, heads down, movements unhurried. Their breath still steams in the morning, but the clouds dissipate faster. Their coats remain thick, winter not yet finished with them, but change has begun its quiet work. The shelter feels warmer even before the fire is lit fully. Felt holds heat differently now. The ground beneath rugs no longer pulls warmth away as quickly. You notice these things, without comment, cataloguing them the way you always have. You do not speak of spring as something that has arrived. That would feel careless. Instead, you allow it to exist as a possibility that grows more convincing with each passing day. The sky continues to widen. The sun climbs a little higher, lingers a little longer. Snow recedes in patches, then advances again after a cold night, as if reminding you not to forget too quickly. You accept this without frustration. Winter taught you that nothing moves in straight lines. As the days pass, the work remains steady, but less heavy. Your body carries itself differently now. Not lighter exactly, but more balanced. The tension that once lived permanently in your shoulders has softened. Breath comes easier, deeper. You sit outside one evening longer than usual, wrapped in your coat, watching light drain slowly from the horizon. The wind brushes past without demanding your attention. Somewhere nearby, animals settle into rest, quieter now, more spread out. The fire waits inside, but you do not hurry toward it. In this moment, you understand that endurance does not end when hardship eases. It transforms. It becomes memory, habit, knowledge carried forward. Winter shaped you not by breaking you, but by asking the same questions again and again until your answers grew steady. You rise eventually, returning inside, closing the shelter gently behind you. Warmth gathers, as it always has, familiar and reassuring. You settle in, body relaxed, mind quiet. Outside, snow remains in the shadows. Inside, patience remains everywhere. Spring may come fully, or it may hesitate longer. Either way, you are ready. Not because you expect comfort, but because you have learned how to endure without needing it. And as rest settles over you once more, you carry with you the quiet knowledge that you survived. Not loudly, not heroically, but steadily, beneath an endless sky that watched without judgment as you learned how to remain. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.